Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and welcome to our climb tutorial in the iniBuilds Airbus A350. We've completed our takeoff, we are now up in 9,000 feet and climbing, and we can start this tutorial by running the after takeoff flow. So when everything is complete, you just check again that the flap lever is up, the spoilers are retracted, landing gear is up, and the packs are on. Next up, as we're passing 10,000 feet, we can run the 10,000 feet climb flow. And this one is rather easy, so let's go for it. Now, we start with the landing light, which we can switch off. Do note, however, that if you are operating in an airspace where VFR traffic can be expected, think United States of America, it is recommendable to keep the landing light on until you are out of that airspace, so 18,000 feet in the US. We can turn the seatbelts into the auto position once our pitch is below 7 degrees and estimated to stay below there. So seatbelts auto, of course only if no further turbulence is expected. From there we move down to our EFIS options, and we basically set them however we need them. So today we are flying over a couple of mountains, so we are going to keep the terrain mode on the FO's display. However, weather might also be factored, so I am going to keep the weather radar on the captain's display. Next, we check the ECAM memo for anything that might be over here and might be relevant for our flight. And thereafter we're going down into the FMS. First we go onto the nav aid page, and on here we remove any manually tuned nav aid that we might have previously had. Thereafter we move to the performance panel, and over here we check the optimum altitude and the maximum altitude and compare those to our planned cruising altitude so that we can make adjustments as they become necessary. And that is the climb flow at 10,000 feet completed. Now, as we are climbing through the transition altitude, we are going to set standard on our altimeters, and remember, in the A350 it's reversed compared to the A320 and the A330, so by pushing it in, that's how you set standard. Be sure to do the same on the Asus as well, and ensure that you have standard on your colleague's side as well. Cross-check that, and then you can do the after takeoff checklist below the line. And that's barrel ref, standard set, after takeoff checklist complete. And with that, we are now up and in the air. So let's start by discussing a couple of the different autopilot modes that we have available at our disposal at this time. So we flew our departure completely managed. That means the aircraft is taking over everything that needs to be done. So it's guiding the aircraft along our standard instrument departure, which we can see both on the nav display as well as over here on our departure chart. It's guiding the aircraft along the vertical profile, so everything happens automatically, and that's what we call managed modes. And we can see that up here on the FMA, in that we have climb mode and nav mode. However, you do also have modes available where the pilot is controlling these things, and these are what we call selected modes. Let's have a look at a couple examples right now. I am going to set a higher altitude here, and you will notice that whenever I'm doing this, I'm switching over to steps of thousands. But when I'm done, I'm switching back to steps of hundreds. That's because it is easier to spot an accidental setting of flight level 381 over here than an accidental setting of flight level 370. So always keep that in mind. Now let's have a look at the available autopilot modes. When we're using the climb mode, then the aircraft guides us along the flight plan, taking into consideration any restrictions that might be entered in our flight plan down here. If we want to ignore those restrictions though, for example because ATC has relieved us of them, then you can pull the altitude knob like that, and that engages open climb. Open climb does the same thing as climb mode, so it sets a thrust and then pitches in order to maintain the speed. Now, to be exactly precise, auto thrust sets the thrust, but it commands maximum thrust in a climb or minimum thrust, aka idle, in a descent. And in open climb mode, the aircraft now pitches to maintain the speed with a maximum thrust or a derated thrust set through the auto thrust system. It is recommended that you normally use the climb mode. Open climb can be used if you are relieved of ATC speed restrictions and want to climb above constraints from the FMS. Of course, you can also go into the FMS and delete those constraints, but I kind of find it easier to use the open climb mode, and then when you're in open climb, then you can remove the restriction from the FMS and then return to managed mode. You also have vertical speed mode available, however it is really not recommended to use vertical speed mode. The reason is that in vertical speed you are not protected from losing your speed. The A350 does have automatic reversions, so if you run into a low speed scenario it is going to protect you, but you may lose a lot of speed or you may get too fast, as it may happen depending on your auto thrust status. If auto thrust is off, you might also overspeed the aircraft. So vertical speed mode is basically not recommended in climb. The aircraft is equipped with a small altitude change mode. Let's go ahead and have a look at that. So we are going to level off in flight level 230 right now. Let's set that down over here. And after we level off, we are going to assume that ATC clears us to climb just 1,000 feet higher. So we're in speed and alt star. Alt star means it's acquiring the altitude now. Let's wait until we see alt mode, so when the capturing of the altitude has completed. So basically now. And now let's say that we are cleared to climb to flight level 240, so that's just 1,000 feet. If we now go into managed mode, you can see that we still get thrust decline and climb, but the aircraft is going to limit the thrust so that we achieve a rate of climb of approximately 1,000 feet a minute over here. Or at least it should do that. Looks like iniBuilds might not have implemented that mode, but that's what it should do. I am gonna file a bug report on that one. Alright. Next up, if you're in alt star and you then change your FCU altitude, you can see the aircraft reverts into vertical speed mode. That is a rather easy thing to catch you out on. So if it's trying to capture and then ATC clears you higher, then you might fall out of your climb or open climb mode, and you might fall into vertical speed mode. So always have a look at the FMA, as that is the only way the aircraft speaks to you and tells you what it's doing. So let's continue our climb again to flight level 380, our planned cruising altitude. Now next, let's have a look at the different navigational modes. So nav mode is the default mode. In nav mode, the aircraft simply follows the route that is planned through the FMS. You also have heading mode available. However, when you go to heading mode, then you can no longer use climb mode, so then you have to go to open climb. Let's try that. I'm going to pull the heading knob here, and you can see now it has reverted into heading and open climb. And you could hear that triple click, which indicates to us that a mode reversion has occurred, aka climb mode has reverted into open climb. Now let's go back to nav mode over here, and let's also go back to the climb mode. Now the third mode we have available up here on the FMA is our auto thrust mode, and you can see two different modes. So right now we're in thrust derated climb. That is something that you may not be familiar with from your Airbus A320. A330 pilots will know what that is about. However, the derate climb function is a little bit more optimized in the A350 than it is on the A330. So on the climb panel down here, you can see that our thrust is in auto derate. That means the aircraft is not going to apply maximum thrust, but it is going to reduce that thrust in order to achieve a decent rate of climb, while at the same time keeping the EGT a little bit lower and therefore extending your engine life. Now, if it becomes necessary to increase your rate of climb, then it is always a good idea to go down here into the climb panel and change auto derate into climb. You can see that now the aircraft is increasing the thrust, and that is going to result in a better rate of climb. So that's what you can do down here. Now, the standard mode is derated climb for the simple fact that it increases engine life, while of course it also does use a little bit more fuel since you're at lower altitudes for a little bit longer. Now, let's say that ATC needs to know if you're able to make a certain restriction. You have two ways of finding out. So down here on the flight plan page you can see which altitudes are predicted at which waypoint. So if ATC asks us, are you able to reach flight level 380 at Etuba? You can look over here, you can see 380, yes, you're able. Another way to find out if you're able to reach a certain altitude within a certain distance is using the prediction 2 function on the climb panel. So by default this shows us the FCU altitude, but we can change this. So let's go in here and I'm going to enter flight level 340 and press enter. And now it will recalculate the time and the distance we need to reach that flight level that we have just entered. So that's pretty useful. Well, let's just remove that again, bring it back to the standard FCU altitude setting. Now that much about the different modes we have available. If we still need to increase our rate of climb because we can't meet a restriction, then there is one thing that you can do, and that is to reduce your aircraft speed down to the green dot speed. Green dot is always available on the takeoff panel. You can see it's 227 knots over here. So you could go to selected speed and then change that to 227. And the green dot speed is always going to give you the best angle of climb. So the green dot speed provides you with the shortest distance over ground to reach any given altitude. So that's fairly useful. Now, as we're climbing up into higher altitudes, even with good weather conditions, we will at some point have to use anti-ice. And even if it's 30 degrees down low, chances are that it is going to get pretty cold up at altitude. You can see right now we have a TAT of minus 26 degrees, a static air temperature of minus 54 degrees, so eventually you might need anti-ice. But when do you need it? So anti-ice is needed, or to be more precise, engine anti-ice is needed when you are within visible moisture. That can be clouds, precipitation, you name it. So you are within visible moisture and the TAT is plus 10 degrees or lower and the SAT is above minus 40 degrees. So within that range you would turn on the engine anti-ice. But there is another anti-ice system, and that's the wing anti-ice. So when are you going to turn that on? Wing anti-ice is only turned on if icing is actually detected on the aircraft. So how can you detect icing? Well, have a look outside and search for any features. For instance, down here we've got that little probe, which actually is an ice detection probe. So if ice builds up on here, then you can be sure that ice is also building up on the wing. You can see that if you're going close to the window, it's almost impossible to actually see the wing from here. You can just barely get that winglet into view like that. So it's almost impossible to see if you have actual icing on the wing itself. Now, this already tells you that wing anti-ice is only used reactively, while engine anti-ice is used proactively. If you know that you're going to enter icing conditions, you will turn on the engine anti-ice, but only if ice actually builds up. Only then you turn on the wing anti-ice. And you keep the wing anti-ice on for maybe 30 seconds to a minute or something, and then you turn it back off again. So wing anti-ice actually just removes the icing from the wing, and then you turn it back off again. While engine anti-icing is continuously going to stay on and prevent ice from forming on the engines in first place. Now with all of those items done, let's go ahead and have a look at one more thing that you will sooner or later have to do within your climb, and that's logging on to CPDLC. Now, CPDLC is Controller Pilot Data Link Communication, and it basically is some sort of WhatsApp that enables you to text message with air traffic control. Quite a cool tool, that much I can tell you. So how do you do that? You go to the ATC com page down here, and then to the connect button on the top. Now you can only do this if you are flying online or if you're using, say, Intentions ATC add-on. Then up here you type in the identifier that you want to connect to. So for example, Echo Delta Yankee Yankee for Maastricht radar. Hit enter, and then you hit the notify button, and that basically executes the lock-on. So you can hit that over here, then it sends the notification to that air traffic controller, and then once the air traffic controller has confirmed the connection on his side, you will see active ATC Echo Delta Yankee Yankee over there. Now, that's basically how you do this. Of course, we are flying offline for the recording of this tutorial. For this reason, we are not going to be able to actually log on to any air traffic controller, so I'm just going to hit disconnect all over here again, and that's it. Now, that basically is how to connect to CPDLC. A more thorough tutorial on how to use CPDLC is available on my channel for the Airbus A320 and is quite similar to the A350. We'll see if I can find some Watson controller who is kind enough to go through a CPDLC tutorial with me. We'll see about that in the upcoming future, but not for this particular video. Well, and that concludes our climb tutorial. That's pretty much all there is to it. So at this point, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this one interesting. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments underneath the video. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.